Sounds good. All right, welcome everyone to the April 18th Portland Utility Board meeting. Under Portland City Code and state law, the Portland Utility Board is holding this meeting electronically. Board members and relevant city staff are attending remotely, electronically, or by phone, and the city has made it available for the public to listen to the audio broadcasts of this meeting. This meeting is being recorded, and the public will have an opportunity to provide comments during the public comment portion of the agenda. And you can always provide written testimony to us by emailing utilityboard@portlandoregon.gov. Pub believes and acts upon anti-racist principles in our meeting spaces and interactions with Pub. While every person has the right to share their personal perspective, we stand against wrongful conduct, particularly any conduct that is targeted towards people who are made vulnerable by systemic inequities. And this means stepping up as a community when there is wrongful conduct and fostering a space of learning and growth. And the way that we do that is by speaking up and speaking out. Each person on this board is empowered to maintain the culture of the board, and we will focus on the impacted individuals or population, condemning the conduct, not the person.
Hi, my name is Amy Archer-Masters, and I'll quickly run through the meeting guidelines. Please state your name before you speak, and if appropriate, who you're addressing. The chat box is only viewable by me, so please limit to technical and logistical issues, including signing up for public comment, asking for assistance, or reminding us if you've had your hand raised and are waiting to speak. The raise hand function is primarily used by the board. Co-hosts may lower your hand once you begin speaking just to maintain the flow of conversation. During public comment periods, the public can raise your hand when appropriate. If you're connecting by phone, you would press *9 to raise your hand. Videos may be turned on when speaking if desired. It is not required. Please mute your microphone when you're not speaking. And if you're connecting by phone, you can press *6 to mute or unmute. As mentioned, the public comment is taken early in the meeting. You can sign up by sending a chat to me or raising your hand during that section. It's also available just prior to any formal board vote after a motion has been made and seconded by board members. Pass it back to you, Robin.
All right, so board members, we're going to have quick announcements in the beginning. Then we're going to work to finalize our recommendations for the 2024-2025 budget. And then hopefully we will spend the last 30 minutes of our meeting getting an update from BES staff on the project team and discussing the natural resources services delivery. All right, so from there, any pub members have any disclosures of communications to provide?
I have one.
Go ahead, Bob.
Basically, it's a it's not a communications already occurred, but I just wanted to let folks know that if you recall, Commissioner Mapps made a request of us individually and collectively if we had thoughts on our relationship with the budget processes, that he would welcome comments. And again, he really emphasized both individually and collectively. It's come up in a number of my travels over the last few weeks. So I'm going to submit some comments to him just on personally. And I just want to give people a heads up that I was doing that. I know the pub's going to get to that eventually, but I wanted to follow up since I've been having conversations with him anyways about various things.
Thank you for that, Bob. Any other disclosures? All right, not seeing any hand raised. This is the public comment portion. Amy, has anyone submitted public comment beforehand?
I did not have any requests for testimony during the meeting, but I did receive 3 different public comments after the last meeting. So you should have seen those in email. They were all submitted in writing. And so I will include those in the minutes from this meeting so that they are part of the formal record as well.
All right. So make sure to check your email for those public comments. And not seeing any hand raises, let's go ahead and try to review and approve the draft minutes. Board members, you should have received the March 21st pub meeting as well as the April 2nd pub meetings minutes to review. Please raise your hand now if you have any comments or edits that need to be done before they're finalized.
Robin, this is Amy, and just for the record, I wanted to let you know that I did receive in between when I sent it and now just a note from Joanne, who noted an error just on the arrival time for her participation in the prior meeting. I think it was on the March 21st one, so I just corrected that. It was a relic from an old version of minutes that I copied over and didn't catch. So thank you for catching that. I did make that correction.
Thanks, Amy.
All right, not seeing any hand raises. And so with this, would I make a motion to approve the draft minutes with the edits of Joanne's arrival time?
You can. We don't usually do it as a formal motion because we have at least the practice for pub has been to just accept the minutes with that edit. So
Okay.
you as the chair can just say that, and since nobody has raised any concerns, then they're just accepted as provided.
All right, with no concerns raised, we are going to accept the March 21st and April 2nd meeting minutes as they are. Thank you.
So
Oh, go ahead,
do
Amy.
you want me to cover this? I can be pretty quick. I just wanted to make sure that PUP members saw the email that the Government Transition Advisory Committee, they have a survey out for comment and have asked for feedback from advisory boards. That is due on April 28th. So I know that we have a broader conversation happening at PUB, but as individuals, if you can all take the time to provide feedback. There was a little bit of confusion with one of the PUB members, and I had the same confusion when I looked at the survey myself, because it starts by talking about recommendations and asking for your feedback on recommendations, but then there's no document with the recommendations. The questions themselves are all that exist related to each of those recommendations. So they're pretty short statements just about, improving engagement and some different components. So when you're ranking how important it is or how likely it is to have an impact, the recommendation is the question statement. So there's no additional document yet. Their intent is to take the survey information and further develop those based on your feedback. And then really quickly, the other piece, just as an FYI, the voting member recruitment is still moving forward. Interviews are scheduled. So hopefully by one of the upcoming meetings, the recommendations will come back from that group.
And as always, we're always looking for a second chair if anyone has the capacity to facilitate and go to the leadership meetings and just kind of organize how we navigate PUB as a body. We would love to have a chat with you. But I'm excited about the recruitment we're definitely down a handful of people. And I'm excited to see what these new members will bring to our group. So with that, make sure you do the survey if you have the capacity. I think I saw the email. It said it would take 10 to 15 minutes. So if you have the available time, please do. But with that, let's start the first portion of the conversation today, which is we have 45 minutes about roughly to review the draft letter that has been written by a handful of PUB members and Amy. So thank you all for anyone who wrote or edited that document. And the goal is to finalize the letter today, as well as, if necessary, delegate 1 or 2 volunteers just to make final edits. And it looks like the next step the follow-up letter about what our intention, like how we would like to be engaged by the council is.
Yes, that was what I had as the next step. There may be others if people identify them, but I think as Bob mentioned in his disclosure of communication, since the pub has been asked for that input, I think the quicker you can provide that and have that conversation, the better. So what I am pulling up on screen is the current version of the draft letter. And I just want to note that I did receive some edits from one of the volunteers who helped with the drafting of the letter, and updated that this morning. Rather than have all of the track changes on screen because it can get a little bit confusing, I have incorporated any of the changes that were more just language improvement or strengthening how something was framed. And then I've noted with comments on the side, just generally what was changed in each of those sections. But I just wanted you to be aware that there was that change since the last version that you received via email. So my hope was just to go through and identify where you all had some additional feedback on edits or changes or pieces that were missed. So we can just work our way through the letter that way. And then as we hit the parts where there's changes, I can just describe those. So maybe just let's start with this first page. So the introduction is pretty basic. I just included links to the prior letters that you've provided because they do have detail about your values and also some of your earlier recommendations. This first section is just the prelude or the introduction to the fact that you appreciate being invited to the table to talk about budget process recommendations. And that letter will be coming separately. There was a suggestion by a pub member to include some sort of timeline for that. I think the conversation said maybe in May. So I said in here by June, if you want to get more specific about when you think you'll realistically be able to finalize a letter, then we can update that. But I figured at this point you have 2 meetings in May, and so that could be the focus at least of the next meeting, and that it would be reasonable to finish it that month. As I noted, there was some revision just to this top section, just to add in the concern that's been discussed about kind of the uncertainty around transition costs. And continuing to move forward, the next section is talking about the support for the rate increase. And there were some minor changes to kind of just rephrase and strengthen the language. There were also some addition just to add a couple sentences related to the kind of support for addressing the maintenance backlogs and aging infrastructure, and then also bringing back the support for the RAMP program that has been a focus in prior letters. Also added in a specific sentence about the loss of the trainee program so that it was less ambiguous than more specific.
I appreciate that addition. It kind of felt like a big victory for everyone involved, the 8 training programs last year, and now it's immediately on the chopping block. And so it kind of takes away that one step forward advancement. And so I'm glad that we're calling it out here.
And then the next section is about the concerns related to the natural resource program. So there's a lot of detailed content here. I think for the most part, it is consistent with the version that you received by mail. So it was reorganized a little bit to try to make the clear questions called out in the letter. And this is the one that I hadn't integrated yet, but wanted to flag the specific recommendation because it was a content change related to some concern about calling the PSEF funding controversial or opine on its stability. Bob, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I put that in there not just because it was controversial. There was significant opposition to using PSEF for these purposes. And for that reason, I think it is unstable when you have a lot of the constituencies that passed PSEF questioning or outright opposing the use of PSEF funds to backfill bureaus openly. I think it's fair to characterize it as controversial and also as unstable, because I think it is. I don't think anyone working on PSEF would say that this is a stable source of funding for this purpose going forward. In fact, they're very explicit that it's not. This is kind of a one-off, and we'll see where it goes in the future. I would also, by the way, add proposed to the section, proposed cuts to the natural resources up at the top in the bold print. So before cuts, I would just add proposed after regarding.
About
Let me
Robin
jump
and then
in.
Karen.
Yeah, I was also I like the edit that Karen had, because I was also thinking that it was kind of doing a disservice to ourselves and just general climate goals and the representing the public over corporate interests to say that it was unstable and highly controversial. But I do want to acknowledge that the way that Bob described it, it seemed like he was specifically describing the recent edits to it, and that I can understand that part being controversial, but I think the way that it was worded was not aligned with the initial vote being a 2/3 of Portland voters supporting this. So I was like, it doesn't seem controversial. It just seems like business interests with moneyed interests were upset about it, but I can definitely see with some clarification that the controversial part was should the city council have opened up PSEF to fund budget deficits rather than keeping the money as it was previously. And so yeah, I didn't want to do a disservice to PSEF as a personal supporter of it, but I do see the clarification that if we can find a way to successfully elaborate on the clarification that it's specifically that it was opened to bureaus to use, I can see how that would be a powerful statement.
Karen, go ahead.
Thank you, Karen Williams, voting member, and thanks for those comments, Robin, and thank you, Bob, for the sort of context around the choice of words there. Not opposed in concept, and not disagreeing, actually, in concept with the elements of this situation that are controversial and potentially unstable. My concern really comes from my lack of familiarity with how the PSEF board is arranged, the extent to which that has community input, how decisions are made by the PSEF board itself about how funds are to be allocated. And so I'm just, like I said, I'm pleading ignorance, I guess, on how that works. And my concern was that if the board of PSEF has made a decision that they believe this is an appropriate use of PSEF funds, I didn't want to sort of like erase that or appear to sort of second guess the body that makes decisions about PSEF fund allocation. So that's just where I was coming from. And again, I'm not going to fall on my sword over sort of wordsmithing stuff. Like I said, it was helpful, Bob, to have, again, the additional context for why those particular words were chosen. I think I guess what I would offer, which is wordsmithing, I guess, is just, something that makes it a little bit more clear that we're speaking not globally about PSEF, but our concern with how the, sort of plugging budget holes with PSEF funds. Our concern is that that's, unstable. It's not like, it isn't the stable source of funding for the needs of the bureaus. And that creates a problem for us because in this case, it's funding core and important programs, and that's not appropriate. So I don't know. I don't have the magic perfect words, but I would be a little more comfortable if we made it clear that this is PUB's view that, the funds are unstable for our needs, and, I don't know. I'm not quite sure where I am with the controversy. It seems like controversy is kind of in the eye of the beholder. And if it's the controversy that's leading to the instability, then maybe that's the connection I'd like to have made a little bit more clear. We can't count on these funds for long term for again, plugging budget holes. I'll leave it at that, but thanks others for your thoughts and comments and sort of helpful explanation on where you were coming from.
Thanks, Karen. Let's go to Julia and then Bob.
Yeah, every time someone spoke, I got more nuance in my head about this topic. I think the reason why the word controversial is in there is because, again, the communities and the organizations that fought so hard to pass PSEF were pretty unified in their opposition for using PSEF funds for this kind of purpose. And when the folks who are responsible for the creation of the program are so vociferously opposed to this kind of use, I agree with Bob that does contribute to the insecurity of it. I was under the impression that the city of Portland commissioners kind of made a unilateral decision about using PSEF funds, but I agree with Karen. If it was a really concerted decision by the folks that do granting, of PSEF funds, that does make me more sensitive to how to wordsmith this. So I think that's a process question that we need to have answered.
So I have a suggestion. I appreciate all the comments. If we can go back up for 1 second, that would be great. The PSEF board was pretty torn, and it was made pretty clear that this was, this is a one-off. So I think what does this work for folks? If we said, using the current language, why is BES shifting cornerstone environmental programs from a stable and well-vetted source, funding source, rates, period, or question mark there, and then say backfilling existing programs with PSEF funds has been controversial and may not be stable. It may not be a stable approach for the long term. Period.
That feels a lot better to me.
I see some thumbs up for that. Let's go to Chris and then Heather.
Yeah, I think there's a difference between because it's my understanding that the PSEF board said it was fine, and then there was community members who didn't like the these funds being used, which there is a difference between the two. And I think we need to be careful how we address this, that we're being clear about who was in opposition. It wasn't necessarily the board, because the board approved this for these funds to be used in this way. I am concerned, same as you guys are, that, you know, is that a long-term solution to be getting money from them? So that's what I just want to be real clear on. There is a difference between community members not liking it and the board approving for the funds to be used for this. And then I agree that it is kind of scary that this is funds that they may not decide that we could have next time around. So it's not sustainable in that way. Hope that helps.
Heather, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm just wondering if it would be helpful and or possible if someone from the PSF board could come and give us a presentation to give us a little more insight.
Bob, did you raised your hand in response to that? Did you have a response about it? Just because I know you have some more familiarity with the PSF board.
I think it'd be great to have PSF come and give us a presentation at some point. I guess I would suggest here, though, that saying it was controversial, you know, whether PSF board member, I mean, I know some of the behind the scenes from PSF as well. And I think it's fair to say it was controversial there too. There was a lot of politicking on this one and a lot of arm twisting and a lot of, well, if we don't do this, it's going to be worse kind of a thing going on. But I don't think that's necessarily germane to the letter. I think all the letter here is saying is it was controversial. There was absolutely significant public opposition and mobilization around this. And so I'm not sure we need to necessarily parse out whether it's PSF or it's a swirl of controversy, what it is right now. And I think if we just leave it as a generic statement that it was controversial, there's going to continue to be a lot of discussion around it going forward. Continue to be opposition. In fact, they're starting another process to kind of look at how they deal with the excess funds. I mean, we're in kind of a perpetual cycle of this now. So, I mean, I think it's fair to just say it was controversial and not tag anyone with it, whether it's council, the public, or PSF. There's turmoil around this. But I like the idea of having them come and talk to us for sure. I think it'd be great to have them come and, you know, give us kind of a general, their general thoughts on how they intersect with the utilities.
I see somebody on the phone has their hand raised. I'm not sure who that is. Is that a board member or a member of staff?
Yeah, this is Alexis Rice.
Oh, great.
Yeah, sorry that I'm just on the phone. I'm in transit. But I did want to, so I can't see the word it's missing, but I do think I'm in agreement with Bob on this one. And I liked his suggested language about acknowledging that it is controversial to be using these funds to backfill bureau work, and then linking that directly to the lack of stability associated with the use of these funds to fill kind of core services of the bureaus. So I liked Bob's suggested language there.
Robin, go ahead.
Well, I like everything that's been said, and I actually had a comment on the following bullet point. So I didn't want to end the conversation unless we felt like we had successfully explained ourselves with that bullet point first.
So I saw some thumbs up and then I heard a little bit of back and forth. So are folks comfortable with the edited version that was provided? So it would be the black text and then the red text on the screen. This would go away. All right, I see thumbs up. So I think we're good on that one. So Robin, go ahead with the next bullet.
Yeah, so for the next bullet point, I know that I've chatted with some pub members on the backside about our views on the general fund. But personally, if you would scroll up a little bit, I don't like the idea that we're at the end of it, the last parenthesis, which is stretched too thin and an unrealistic alternative. I think we're limiting ourselves. I definitely would acknowledge that it is currently stretched pretty thin. But I think we're definitely making a statement by saying that it's rather unrealistic to ever use general funds. I think that Portland voters have voted for governmental change. We're essentially going to have a clean sweep on who city council is. We're going to have a lot of working class people in those positions. And so we are possibly looking at a scrambling of how the general fund is allocated. And so I just don't want to limit ourselves completely to what exists now, as there is grand possibility of what is to come, essentially. And so I agreed with the majority of that bullet point. I just did not like calling general fund money usage an unrealistic alternative, because we are only locked into our current situation for about a year, and then we will have 12 new council members and possibly a mayor that we already know. But there is a definite chance that a big shift could happen, and a big shift would be required, of course, to use any general fund money for projects within the rate bureaus. But I don't want to say that it's impossible, because I think that of all the times that it could be possible, it would be in the upcoming years.
So I'm wondering if there is some language that we could propose here that is that could acknowledge what I think the original intent of that recommendation was, to acknowledge that it's challenging to secure general fund, or has been difficult to secure, particularly for rate paying bureaus. So do you have an idea of language that you'd be comfortable with or propose as an alternative?
Just off the top, I thought that writing "which is currently stretched thin," end of parenthesis, because I just thought that the unrealistic alternative was my main issue with that.
How do people feel about that, or do you support that change or have an alternative suggestion? Bob, go ahead. Bob, did you have a comment you wanted to add? You're still muted.
Sorry. So the change would be to just take out the parenthetical. Is that what's being proposed?
That it would leave the parenthetical, or, well, yeah, it wouldn't need to be in parentheses. It could just be
Which
a
is
general
stretched
fund,
thin?
which is, yeah, is currently stretched thin.
Sure, that's fine by me. So. Or overburdened is the word that seems to be used often in the city, but stretched thin or overburdened is fine, and the rest can come out. Yeah, I'm good with that.
Robin, are you good with overburdened?
I prefer stretched thin, but we can also leave it to the group.
I'm fine with stretched thin too.
Okay.
So let's just keep it there, and thank you.
All right. Anything else in these bullets or in the language around it related to natural resources that folks had comment on?
I just wanted to say how I really liked those paragraphs. I thought it was really heavy hitting, that we were focused on the fact that the bureaus are essentially willing to defund these green and blue infrastructure projects without this money. And so I just want to thank whoever was writing this, because I thought that these were pretty heavy hitting bullet points, as well as the couple paragraphs in general.
Yeah, thanks to Bob for the great language that started it all. And then finally, the closing is the closing. Any other edits or areas that folks want to talk about? All right. Karen, go ahead.
I was just going to make a motion. I don't have any more edits.
Excellent. And pull up
No.
the sample motion if you'd like.
Oh, well, cool. There we go. That makes it super easy. So Karen Williams, voting member, and move approval of the pub budget recommendation letter, as we have revised it today with final edits to be and submission to be completed by pub staff.
This is Robin Castro. I second that.
Great. We have a motion and a second. Any final discussion? We can move to public comment. All right, not hearing any final discussion or public comment. Let's call the roll. Start with you, Robin.
This is Robin Castro, voting member. I vote aye.
I believe I'm up. Karen Williams, voting member, also aye.
This is Heather, voting member. I vote yes.
This is Chris Richard, voting member. I vote yes.
Julia DeGraw, voting member. I also vote yes.
Bob Salinger, voting member. I vote yes.
Alexis Rife, voting member. I vote yes.
All right, motion passes. So at this point,
Wonderful.
we are actually running a little bit ahead of schedule, Robin. So
Yeah. I was actually, well, I was going to ask if you needed a volunteer for the final edits, or if that was just a couple of sentences you'd be able to finalize on your own.
no, I think most of I don't think there's much editing needed. I think everything was discussed and there's no content to add. So I'll just do the
Yeah.
final review for grammar and make sure it flows okay. And I can submit that.
Okay, sounds good. And so, yeah, board, we have about 20 minutes before the next portion of the conversation was going to happen. And that was specifically because we needed a couple people in the room at that time. And so, because we have such a large gap, at least from my perspective, I was thinking we could start brainstorming that secondary letter that we'll be sending about how we want to be and how we want to engage and be engaged with when it comes to the budget period. It could definitely be very rudimentary, but we could at least get started because we do have about 20 minutes of free time before our next guest. I see one thumbs up. Any other thumbs up? Could also take a 20-minute break, but I don't know how helpful that would be.
I'm fine with that.
All right, well, with no major opposition, let's see if we can get Amy to maybe pull up just a blank document and we can start rambling.
Sounds good.
Okay, let's give her a moment to get everything settled. And yeah, wow, that last portion was a breeze. We went into it and I'm like, there is no way we're gonna need 45 minutes for this. So thank you, Bob and Karen and Amy and anyone else who did edits on that. You really brought the letter together rather well, so thank you.
Heather as well. Thank you, Heather.
Okay, so this portion is related to, it was the work session that I specifically attended and gave a 5-minute testimony on, that we gave a testimony on, but that Commissioner Maps had said that he had heard our issues and our complaints navigating the budget process, and feeling that we had essentially been cut off at the knees in a lot of places compared to our original purpose. And so my understanding of what we are crafting now is essentially kind of telling City Council how we want to be informed, addressed, assisted throughout the budget process. And that way we're not coming in at the last minute after things have already been decided and saying, yeah, we like your idea or we don't, but rather that we are fully engaged with the budget process throughout the year, so that we are able to have conversations with important people at the right time and not consistently feel like we are the last stop after plans have already been finalized. So feel free to raise your hand if you have any grievances or ideas about how you'd like us to, just how you'd like Pub to navigate going forward. Go ahead, Karen.
Karen Williams speaking. I don't have a grievance. Well, yeah, I'm not going to speak about a grievance, but I do have an idea. And I believe I floated this at one of our kind of recent meetings. And that is, I'll just say, I would like a much better understanding of how the equity, well, I'll just say the equity managers are integrated into the budget planning process. And ultimately, I would like a better understanding of how the assessments of the equity managers are considered in budgetary decisions, if they are. And one idea, well, a specific idea that I had was to have perhaps the appropriate people, be it equity managers or others, to come to a pub meeting and help us understand how the equity toolkit, which is referenced in several places in the equity reports that came with the budget, to understand how that equity toolkit is applied. I believe the context was more in sort of capital projects, decisions and maintenance, and kind of more, hands-on operational type, sort of fund allocations were, that the equity toolkit was used in that context. But I would love to have a presentation specifically on equity toolkit application and how it's used, and more generally on how equity managers' assessments, opinions, overviews, recommendations are integrated into the budget planning and decision making. And that would be great to have, early on in, during the summer, as kind of, I think perhaps as part of almost, a budget 101, right? This is one aspect of how budgets get built. I hope it is.
Thank you for that, Karen. Go ahead, Joanne.
Hi, Karen and everyone. This is Joanne. I also serve on our Bureau's Equity and Policy team. I support your desire for a presentation, but I thought I could shed just a little bit of light on this now, just in case it informed what you want to ask for. So I should start out by saying it's my manager, Eric Pacheco, who is more engaged in the equity toolkit and the budget. But from what I understand, the budget office, CBO, requires every bureau to fill out essentially a worksheet that explains how the budget connects to the equity work of that budget and the equity work of the city. And so every bureau is required to fill out the same form. And let's see what else. I mean, oh, that's the other thing. I think we would find that every bureau is different. Maybe we're only concerned with Water Bureau and BES, in which case our scope is really manageable. But I know that in our bureau, for instance, Eric is part of our management team. He's at every management team meeting. He's there all the time, involved in all the budget discussions. I don't know if that's true for every equity manager. And then, at the Water Bureau, again, I'm speaking specifically to us, we have the plan to advance equity, diversity, and inclusion. And that's very connected to our asset management plan and our budget asks and things like that. Eric could speak more to that. And we also have a newer equity data toolkit that I know is just beginning to be in use with as far as how we make decisions in the Bureau about how we allocate our resources. But I wanted to share all that with you all in case that's helpful in this conversation. Did anyone have any questions that I could try and answer now? Okay, thanks.
And this is Amy, and I would just add to that, since you spoke to Water Bureau, that BES similarly, they have their equity manager as part of their leadership team. So I mean, they could confirm, but I believe that at least at the two utility bureaus, that structure is the same.
Amy, can I jump in real quick? Or Robin, can I jump in real quick on this, just to provide some parity to what Joanne has shared. There's a lot of terminology here. First, I'll say we'd be glad to have any bureau staff, including equity managers, come and talk about how equity it guides and is factored into our budgeting documents and our overall bureau strategy. So I think we'd be glad to participate in that whenever it's scheduled. I heard toolkit and equity. I forget the term. The equity toolkit that Joanne was referencing, I think, is not so much a budget tool. It is a tool that helps inform and helps decision makers at a lower level, kind of a project level, implementation level. But we do have a number of structured tools to help equity be applied at the right time during our budgeting process. In BES, we use we call it the BEST, lovingly the BEST, Bureau Equity Strategy tool. And that is intended to be a front-end tool to help uncover equity needs that budget decisions can help meet, and then help develop the budget requests that eventually will show up in the budget. So it's it is also rolled up into the document that every bureau has to submit to the Office of Equity and Human Rights as part of the budget. So there's a cluster of equity specific tools that are used in budgeting and in the implementation of projects. And I think we can have some folks come and paint that picture for everybody so folks understand how it all relates.
This is Joanne real quick. Thanks, Farshad. You're right. It is submitted to the Office of Equity and Human Rights, not CBO. I got confused. I appreciate you.
Bob and then Karen.
So sorry, I've had to loop in and out a few times in this meeting. Are we specifically focusing on equity or our relationship to the budget as a whole right now?
Budget as a whole.
Okay. So as I said earlier, I'm going to submit my own individual comments to the commissioner, but just to sort of preview some of what's in there, I think that we need to go back to the original mission of the pub and actually look closely at that and how front and center the budget is among our responsibilities. And it's a year-round responsibility. It's not just weighing in on the budget. It's actually to really track changes, overruns, the fall bump, the budget creation process. And so from my perspective, to really do that, because we're charged with the entire purview, not just one part or one aspect of the budget. We're really charged with being the committee that oversees the entire budget and brings accountability and transparency and public connection to it. And to that end, I think we should be considering some pretty significant moves. One thing I think we should consider is putting it more forward in the recruitment process, that this is a major responsibility of the pub. Another is to orient all pub members, new pub members, with a deep dive on the budget. A third is that, and this one's, perhaps very controversial, that we should devote one of our 2 meetings each month specifically to the budget, getting a budget report, hearing about changes, overruns, challenges. I think we should be thinking about budget subcommittees that look at things like tracking very complex projects like the new water treatment facility, that is now, I think 4 or 5 times the cost that was originally anticipated and just got another $300 million in expense approved. To me, to fulfill our responsibilities, we need to be a year-round budget committee, as well as all the other important things we do related to policy. But it's our job to make sure that those policies are being translated down into the budget and made real. That's where we really do that work ultimately and make sure that it's not just words, but it's actually actions. And I think to do that effectively, we have to have a much, much heavier focus on a monthly basis to get there. So, and I'll be happy to share the letter that I'm writing if it's useful, because it goes into a lot more detail. But where I started was really with the mission of the pub and also the origins, the genesis, which was public skepticism of how the bureaus were spending money was the driver that created the pub in the first place.
Thank you for that, Bob. And I just want to personally add that I was also thinking that we needed to commit more meeting times throughout the year. Not sure if what amount, but my initial thought was at least having 1 or 2 meetings each quarter. And that way we are engaging more often than just in November, December, and January. And also just reading the budget, recognizing that we really only deal with like 1 or 2 of the bureau professionals and high-level managers. And it is our job to review the budget. We also deal with policy and operations. And I think that we could really benefit by engaging in a lot more areas and just hearing what the different managers, not just the finance managers, what they're experiencing, what they're doing each year. And I think that would give us a more well-rounded opinion. With that, because this was kind of an impromptu thing, I'm going to send it off to Alexis, and we're going to wrap up with her comment, and then we're going to go into the next portion of our meeting today.
Thanks, Robin. Alexis Reif, voting member. I just wanted to second what you just said. That's what I was going to say as well about bringing in different managers throughout the year. And then I also want to highlight with the council itself, and I'm not sure how much this is going to change with our new form of government, but last minute decisions coming through without proper time for the pub, like not just the pub, but the bureaus as well, to respond sufficiently to those last minute changes. And I think that it's important that we take advantage of this opportunity to again highlight for them the importance of public input and taking the time to allow for people to review those recommendations and the decisions that are being put forth, and not to rush things through at the absolute last minute. We meet twice a month. It's not like we're meeting quarterly. And so there is opportunity for the council also to be engaging with pub around these kind of last minute decisions and measures that they're pushing through.
I think we have a good starting point. So let's definitely spend some time out of the meeting thinking about how we can formulate our vision into goals. And then with that, let's move on to our next section. Give me just a second to play around on my computer for a half second. So this next, so between now and the end of the meeting today, we're going to spend discussing the natural resources service delivery. And so we're going to start that with an update from BES staff on the project team that Bob and a few of us are on, and any changes to that work plan. So please help me welcome BES Director Dawn Uchiyamas and Project Lead Shannon Anderson. As well as looks like we have a couple Portland Parks and Rec director and some staff present as well. So please welcome them all. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Robin. Chris, did you want to kick us off?
Sure, I'll do that. So I'm Chris Wallace Caldwell, she, they pronouns, and I am with Catalysis LLC. We provided support in facilitating these workshops that you were referring to, Robin, that you've been participating in. So what we want to do with our time today is to come back to you and let you know where we are in the process, and also hear any input from you as well. We'll start with some welcome from the directors Uchiyama and Long first. I'll go over I just have a few slides to kind of hit on the highlights of what the work is that we're doing and what's been accomplished really over the last month or so. And then we'll talk a little bit about next steps. Laura Lehman from Parks may hit more on next steps, but I will be sure also after I share the slides, I want to hear input from those of you that were on the, so Robin and Bob, I know here, who were part of those workshops. We want to get your input that you can provide to the group and your perspective on that process. So with that, I'll turn it over to the directors.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Chris. Good afternoon, everyone. I guess it's, just turned noon. It's really great to be with you here today on this agenda topic. I'm very pleased and very honored to have your time and attention on this important topic. And mostly we just really want to thank all of you for your commitment to natural resource service delivery in Portland. A special thanks to Bob and to Robin for serving as the pub leads in this project. I know other folks weighed in, but we're really excited to be at this major milestone of having this work plan and ready to share this with City Council. Adina and I have just been to, last week we presented this to the Parks Board, and today we presented it to the Urban Forestry Commission, and now we're here today at Pub. So we're making the rounds, making sure all the T's are crossed and the I's are dotted, and here to get your impressions and kind of final word on where we are with this plan. So mostly just want to say thank you for giving us time on the agenda, and thank you for your time and attention to this topic. And Adina, I will turn it over to you.
The downside of going second, I want to echo everything that Dawn said. Really appreciate being invited here to present, and also really appreciate Pub's enthusiasm and interest in this process. And we look forward to continuing our work together. And I'll stop here because I imagine there'll be a lot of questions and I don't want to take up too much time. So I'll punt it back to Chris.
All right, thank you. I'm gonna go to my slides here. So kind of just to lay some context in some ways, as Robin, you were saying earlier in that previous discussion, the importance of slowing down and allowing the time to process. In some ways, since the beginning of the year, we have been working to slow down and actually get a greater amount of input on how to respond to Resolution 37609. And, you know, as you all know and recall, that resolution is really a broad resolution focused on transformation, alignment of services, and shared priorities for natural resources across the city. We also have the Resolution 37635, which falls within that overall resolution and speaks to the management of natural area and trees. And these two workshops were really focused on how to consider the way in which the work should be done to address that city resolution. So this was our way to bring both representatives from the advisory bodies as well as subject matter experts from staff. And I will say the directors were not part of the workshop, so these were for just the folks described there. And it represented subject matter experts across 5 bureaus. Even as we recognize that there are broader implications for the city as a whole, and that's something that you'll see in the work plan as well. And the purpose of this was to look at that work plan draft that was just originally laid out at the beginning of the year and that you all saw, and it was a chance to dig deeper into that. This work plan is due to the CEO on April 30th, so this is our goal that we're working with. And a really important context is that this work to do this was not actually the process of laying out the changes that should be made to natural resource delivery, but an important way to describe what is the process that we should be taking to do that. So rather than quick solutions, this is a process that lays out the inputs that need to come into it, the ways and who should be involved in it, and the outcomes that we hope to see. So there were 2 different workshops. The first one focused on, we had folks take the work plan, which I know you all seen, which has a fair amount of detail, but we organized it into a slightly different way in thinking about how does the work plan identify the inputs? What information or resources do we need to do this work? How does the work plan describe the process? Who should be involved? How decisions are made? And then what are the outcomes we want to see? What do we want to ensure is done as a result of going through that work plan? What do we want to see as a result? And so we had folks weigh in on these particular things at the first workshop. There were, what we did is we took all the pieces of the major pieces of the work plan and actually put those on large stickies so that they were present in the room, organized around these 3 components. And then we gave folks a lot of time to contribute to how would you add nuance to this? What are the concerns you have about this? What do you believe must be part of this? So that was all captured, all that input was captured. We created a tracking system so that we could identify and provide back to the folks who participated in the workshop what was done with each piece of input and where in the work plan was it integrated. All of the input was integrated, and so it was identified, that specifically, but we know that's not enough. We need to kind of come back into that work and begin to dig a little deeper. So we did a second workshop that allowed us to look at each of the 7 major areas of the work plan, and within each of these ask for, go back into and identify how well have we done in integrating, what's still missing, and what's really important to consider in each of those 7 components. We are in the process of, well, actually, I should say that that input has been integrated, and I'll have Laura speak a little bit to where we are in terms of the work plan that you're going to see next. But I'm going to give you a little bit of, this is high level because we got such a breadth of input, but the real highlights from the input we got is really looking at the critical inputs and processes that we want to see. So a lot of discussion around clarifying the problem that we're working to solve, really looking at what are some of the things that we want to see change as a result of this work. And the other thing that's important to note is really clarifying what work has already been done. There's been work that's been going on for the last number of years among the bureaus, and in particular between BES and Parks. So how to make the best use of that work to build on that. There was also the Eco Northwest report, but we knew that was just a start. So how to take that work and take it to the next level, which includes things like expanding the inventory, the assessment, and the analysis that was done by Eco Northwest. To take those possibilities that they identified and actually do deeper work on those and understand what maybe hasn't been identified as a possibility. Ensuring meaningful engagement with partner staff, advisory board and community, clarifying roles, clarifying the decision-making process, and really a lot of focus on having timely, clear, transparent communications about the process. So an example of that is there's been discussion about a need for a clear glossary of language and terms that the different bureaus use. And a really good input on this was not just to have those terms identified for clarity among the bureaus, but how can we have public-facing definitions as well to help the public understand what we mean by things like natural areas, and how to be more effective at communicating that one city approach to natural resources. And the important thing is thinking about those outcomes, and so common vision and goals. You may recall those blue sky outcomes that were identified in some of what we put in front of you. And one of the things that we heard from participants is that's maybe a start. That's maybe connecting to some metrics in the city, but really building that to identify potential opportunities for things like addressing a biodiversity crisis. How can we really think about what are those overall outcomes that we want to track for the city? So those were the big pieces that we got in terms of this. I'm going to come to next steps. And actually, Laura, since I have this slide here, maybe I'll turn it to you to describe where we are right now.
Sure, thanks, Chris. So shown on the slide, as Chris was saying, we've just wrapped up those 2 workshops that she was describing. And today, if you folks haven't seen it already, I think you can expect to see a revised version of the work plan draft. It's been distributed to the Portland Utility Board liaison. So I think that'll be coming your way. That is there for you to take a look at and provide any comments that you would like. We're asking the comments be provided back by next Wednesday, that's April 24th. And you can send those to Shana or to myself. After that, once we've received those, we'll be integrating that final input into the final draft of the plan, and giving the Bureau directors a chance to review that. We'll be briefing commissioners on the status of the work next week. All of that in preparation to deliver the work plan to the CAO on April 30th.
Thank you, Laura. Okay, so that's a lot of high level. There's, of course, a lot of detail we could discuss, and we look forward to getting your additional input. You will see that the work plan is laid out in these 7 sections, and being able to dive deeper into those will be important, and a place for you to provide input on that. I will say the other thing is we did ask the workshop participants to provide some sort of guiding some parting words of wisdom, like, when this goes to the CEO, how can we ensure that this is successful? And we're pulling these together as well to see if we can have this be something that accompanies that context for the work plan of, the contributions that people made in this process. So with that, what I'd like to do is open it up before we do to general questions and comments, invite the folks from Pub who were part of the process. So Bob, Robin, Julia, I know you all were reps, and I also know you were getting input from your colleagues as well. So happy to have you weigh in on your perspective on the process. See, it looks like Bob, you came off mute.
Yeah, I'm happy to go last, so if others want to go.
Robin or Julia?
Honestly, I would love for Bob to lead this.
Okay. First of all, I appreciate the work that's going into this, and Chris, your guidance on it, and all the staff that are putting in time. I think there's some positive things here. I will be candid and say that I am concerned that this is an elaborate process for a process that comes on the heels of two other processes, and that we are kicking a can down the road, basically because different bureaus are not in alignment, and it's getting passed off to a lot of process, which is sometimes what the city does and is kind of notorious for. My perspective is actually the city and Eco Northwest did a very, very good job on the report. It is very comprehensive, and it outlines 4 different strategies for dealing with this issue. And my hope is that we really dig down deep on that going forward and look at that more closely, because we haven't done it, and use that as a real starting point. Too much work has been done already. And I think we need to take a hard look at that and see what is there and really understand it and analyze what we think is really missing, because there's only so many alternatives out there and variations on a theme for how you do this. And they kind of run the range from almost do nothing to do everything, consolidate everything. So, I think there's a continuum there that can be tweaked. I worry that we're starting to add all kinds of layers to it that we don't necessarily need to figure out how to align things. And that can be a bottomless pit when we start to dig into, all the different programs and how they lay out on the landscape. Do you actually need that to actually organize a bureau structure? And I'm not sure at the end of the day, we will come up with something that will resolve what I see as an interbureau conflict right now. I think we could put in a lot of time and work. We could engage tons and tons of people, but I'm not sure that we're really going to add that much value at the end of the day. I hope we do. But that's where I'm sitting right now, is that this is a very elaborate process, and we have a lot of the data in front of us already. And sometimes I think the place for the public really becomes, where there's really productive public engagement is not kind of asking them what the structure should be and where you put positions within the city for natural resources, because most of the public can't get their head around it. I think where the public really becomes, integral is once you have kind of a framework for them to work with, how does the public want to interact with that framework? What do they think the priorities should be within that framework? What do they think the deficits are, the opportunities? But I think we need to separate out those two questions. What is the general structure for natural resources in the city? And then how does it really intersect with the public in terms of getting feedback on priorities and communication? So I'll stop there. And I don't mean to be a wet blanket on this, but I really fear that we are now in stage 3 of processes for processes, and the information is mostly already there. And we haven't taken a hard look at it yet in a way that really would force us to say, we actually think a lot is missing, or what do we think is missing? And so it feels kind of, despite the fact a lot of work has gone into it, kind of de novo, kind of like we're building from scratch again. And the city likes to ask very open questions. What do you think we should do? I think the public reacts better when we give them more information and let them bounce off of that. Even if they hate it, you get a lot more depth in the information they transmit back to you. So I'll stop there.
Thank you, Bob. I appreciate that, and appreciate that comment on digging deeper into the Eco Northwest. I think that's, we definitely heard input of folks that wanted to do that. Robin or Julia?
I wish I had more to contribute. My day job and rest of my life has been pretty overwhelming lately, so I've not been able to do as deep a dive here. Moving forward, I'll be able to have a little bit more time, which I'm excited about. But Bob definitely didn't say anything I wouldn't have said. He's really tracking this well, and I second what he said, but I don't have anything additional to offer right now.
I appreciate that, Julia. I know you weren't able to be at the meetings, but I didn't know if you were looking in the background. I wanted to offer you that. So
I mean, the degree which I got briefings, they were from Bob, and I'm in alignment, but I have not been able to engage the way that I had hoped. But again, have more time moving forward, which is good.
thank you so much. Robin.
Yeah, I was mostly going to defer to Bob on this one as well. I personally just found it a little bit hard to engage in the last meeting, having missed the previous one, and so I am hopeful that the read ahead that was sent to pub members is going to give me a little bit more solid foundation, and that way I can provide some feedback. But at the current time, some of this is a little bit over my head, but I do hope that we can come together as a group so that we can offer that extra feedback.
Great. Thanks, Robin. And there were notes from that first meeting that might be helpful. But the first meeting was a lot of like trying to get on the same page as far as the context. And that, that took some time, and we did some really good groundwork there. But yeah, that would have been hard to jump from missing that. Let's just open it up to the full group with comments, questions, or perspective. Go ahead, Karen.
Thank you so much, Karen Williams, voting member. General question from me, and I am trying to understand, I guess, sort of timing and form of the actual proposal for changing structure, changing where services are delivered from, changing how services are funded. I mean, the actual proposal, is that, so I'm seeing in the draft work plan, I'm seeing a number 3, service delivery improvement proposal. So that kind of sounds like that. And then there is budget proposal is number 4. So I guess my question is, at the end of the day, is the proposed new structure going to come in the form of or within the fiscal year 24-25 budget?
Either the directors or Laura want to speak to that?
I can jump in and just say that the way that we've been talking about this is that the changes that we will likely want to make will take time. And while there'll be an initial proposal, presumably this fall, that will inform the next budget cycle, it likely will inform multiple budget cycles. And as we, shift from the space of it being perhaps more BES and parks focused to including the other infrastructure bureaus, and now also including the deputy city administrators in the new form of government, I think that we can expect that there will be multiple changes over multiple years, and I think that answers your question, at least a part of your question.
And maybe specifically to FY25, which is Karen, did you ask about the fiscal year this fiscal year?
Well, I asked about that because that's what's cited in the work plan, or the draft work plan is the primary deliverable number 4, budget proposal. So again, I'm making the assumption that that's the budget proposal related to the service delivery proposal, the budgetary aspects of the changes that are being proposed in service delivery. So anyway, that was why I specifically cited 24-25 budget proposals, just because that was, that's what the work plan says. I have a follow-up question. Maybe it's more of a comment than a question, but I ask about the timing and sort of the form that the proposal will be in, because I see, starting summer 2024 through spring of 25, that the work plan says city policies and rules related to the new proposed structure as needed, right, will start to be made in that time period. And so, oh gosh, I can't exactly articulate a question out of that, but just to me, that sounds like, I don't know, like if indeed we are talking about, many changes structurally, funding, etc., that will be made over a period of several years, at least some years. It seems premature to start changing policies and rules this summer. It almost sounds like the changes in rules and policies are happening before there's sort of a fully agreed upon proposal for what's going to happen.
That's the good question. I wonder if Shana or Laura, you could speak to how the work plan is structured right now, because I think you might have a response to that.
I'd be happy to. And do you want to jump in, Shana? Okay.
Thanks.
So for your initial question, I was thinking the way the work plan's laid out, that the start of this process, there was that initial resolution 37609, and then later there was the second resolution 37635. And the first resolution directed us to take a look at kind of the whole universe of city delivery of natural resource services. And the second resolution was more targeted on just tree canopy and natural areas and directed us to look at some shorter term potential improvements. So when you look in the work plan document, under each of the 7 sections, under each of those deliverables, there's an initial one section that's OM, that's those shorter term ones. And then there's a second one that's NR for natural resources. That's the longer term one. So there's kind of 2 pieces in there for each. So for the fiscal year 24-25, that section is from the OM and was, we were trying to leave space for the possibility of, doing these things as we go along. But that was focused on that OM, the operational management one, it had instructed us to take a shorter term look. So I think that was my thought on that. Hopefully that gives some clarity. But I wanted to support everything that Dawn said about being able to make iterative change as we go along. So I think there might be some initial changes, but then those changes would continue over time. With regard to the policies and those updates, that item is really in there. So once we figure out, so that item is there in order to allow us to make any changes that need to be made to enable us to implement whatever structure or changes come out of the work around this work plan. So it's not intended to be general natural resource policy changes. It's intended to be limited to changes that would be needed in order to allow us to implement whatever comes out of the process. So it's possible, it says as needed, it's possible that whatever comes out of this process won't require any policy or rule changes, but it's also possible that the preferred options that come out over time might require some changes to those things. So the near-term timeline is intended to provide the flexibility to let us start working on those. If that, as we move forward, if we identify a need to make those changes to implement any improvements that come out of the process, to be able to begin working on that, but it wasn't intended. So this is something we can work on clarity. It wasn't intended to show policy changes first and other changes second. It was intended to be concurrent with the other work so that we could make sure if there were policy or rule pieces that needed to be addressed, that we would be able to address those as we go along with implementation. So I appreciate the questions. All of the questions that we get really help me wrap my mind around what needs to be clarified.
Thank you, Laura. Karen, did that help you with what you were looking for? Great. And that's, as Laura mentioned, hearing this input also, reflects the places where it might be unclear in the work plan, some of the things that need to be identified or made clear. Any other comments, questions? I know we're coming up on time.
We probably have about another minute if someone has a question or comment to add for clarification.
If I may just quickly make a comment, I just wanted to respond to Bob's concern about process after process. And I really do appreciate the frustration and the difficulty of kind of staying engaged in the conversation and having faith that ultimately changes will result. But I do want to acknowledge that we're in a transition time in the form of government, and I think the bureau structure and the commissioner structure has made it difficult to land this in a timely way. So I guess I just want to put out there that this time it will be different because our form of government will be different, and also we have received just, I think, a lot of really good feedback and expectations from the community. Our feedback from the Parks Board and from Urban Forestry has been very meaningful. We're obviously taking what you're sharing with us now and what Bob has shared with us before very seriously. And so it is, I think it is informing the process so that it's better, and there is a very strong commitment for a tangible outcome that people can feel and see. I think that was actually one of the Park Board questions. What will people see on the ground? How will they know that this work is making a difference? So I want to ask everyone to please stay engaged and to not give up hope, and that we're going to be making this next round with with more people included, and I think with clear expectations and accountability set.
All right, so let's wrap it up with Bob. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'll let Don have the last word. I'll just hold it.
Thank you for that. And I just want to thank everyone again, all of the guest speakers here today for your time and for your input and educating us on how the process is coming along. We definitely are invested in the success of this group and want to offer as much as we can. So thank you all again. And thank you, Chris, for moderating. And then with that, I think we're just wrapping up the conversation today with on the screen is a list of potential carryover topics for next meeting. We started the conversation today about that letter that we're going to send out, and Jack from Commissioner Mapp's office made a good point that we should be mindful to make sure that we're not only engaging the city council when we're writing that letter about how we want to navigate the budget, because we will be dealing with deputy city administrators. And so maybe just having a slightly wider lens on how we navigate writing that letter and who it is, who's going to read it. So I thought that was a good recommendation. Other than that, Amy, do you have any final things?
Nope, I think that's it.
All right, so with that, meeting adjourned.